All right, guys, so we're going to do an Unleash video, hang out here for a bit and do some sculpting. Some of you wanted an update to the hard surface sculpting videos that I did previously. And we're going to kind of touch on some of that stuff, the changes in Blender since then, and kind of just have some fun, I think. So first up, graphics tablet settings. Somebody asked about this previously. So set up your graphics tablet software for Blender. Do middle click as your bottom barrel button, right click as your top. And click, of course, for the tip. And then what this allows you to do is now bottom barrel orbits, control bottom barrel, shift bottom barrel, all does that. And then alt middle click or alt bottom barrel, let you look around like that. Alt middle click and gesture, jump you into side views, top views, and all that fun stuff. So you can get around really easily in a 3D scene with just your tablet and your keyboard. Use them both. So now, for sculpting in Blender, turn on the back end of Vulkan. It's much more performant. It works much better. So do that. Key map, you may want to use tab for pie menu if you're in vanilla Blender. If you're using machine tools, you already have a modes pie. But control tab is usually the pie menu. If you tab for pie menu, tab key becomes a pie menu. Okay. You're going to be in and out of edit mode, object mode, sculpt mode quite a bit while creating things in Blender. So navigation, you can turn on trackball. This lets you spin the view, right? So out here, you can just kind of spin it as needed. And then in the middle, you can go left or right, orbit. And if you ever get kind of disoriented, tilde key, view right, orbit back out, you'll be good to go. So yeah, you're pretty much going to still do a lot of possible modeling or any number of different things here could take place. And so we're just going to start simple. We're going to go to sculpt mode, turn on dynamic topology. You'll see it complains there real quick. And it's only complaining if we go back to object mode and grab our cube. We can remove the UV map right here. Tilde key back or tab key back into sculpt mode. And you'll see next time we turn on dynamic topology, it doesn't complain. That's all it's saying is that it's got UV map information. All right, so with that out of the way, what we're going to be doing is starting with dynamic topology, but let's go over some basics. The draw brush is what we're going to be using first, I think, but F key, right, and Shift F. So F key for size, Shift F for strength. Now, also, some of you guys are going to ask about the viewport. I'm using a matte cap that's in my matte cap pack. I just gave it the name ZBrush Gray. It's meant to mimic the ZBrush kind of default gray over there, matte cap. And you can download those off Gumroad if you cavity on, both, valley and ridge, okay? That's how this kind of looks the way it does. You can turn like the grid off and whatever else you want to do to the scene, right? Okay, now, I just want to kind of go over dynamic topology. We might use it in some instances. I kind of use it to get big shapes or forms going first, and then I work into more detail with the voxel system usually, but I kind of grab this, or I could just use a sculpt tool for real quick. So basically, dynamic topology will add resolution and dynamically subdivide the mesh triangulated like this, right? So it's very useful. So you can create blockouts and things very fast and deform things. Something like snake hook, for example. If we were to press F, make it larger, you can see you can snake hook things out very easily. So really good to get your initial forms, shapes going. Now, if we zoom in with it, it goes to a higher resolution. If we zoom out, it reduces it. This is the way it works. By default, it's called subdivide collapse. You can just do subdivide if you want. So when you zoom in, higher resolution, zoom out, now it doesn't collapse. Okay. So if you do want it to, like say you got to clean something up, you could take density brush here. It still does it. Okay. So if you go in with it, more, out, it erases, right? So that's kind of how it does that. If you want to increase the resolution a bit, you can try 8 or 6 maybe. So now it'll just be a little denser whenever you're working at all on it, right? Okay. Now, something else that you can kind of do, HardOps has an option for it, which is decimate. I don't really care for the way it works, but while you're sculpting on something, let's just go ahead and symmetrize this again real quick and turn on symmetry for X. While you're symmetrize, or like while you're modeling something with dynamic there with the dynamic topology, sometimes they get a little bit too much, like the performance will start to slow down and things like that. And so what will happen is what you'll want to do is sometimes you want to go to sculpt and rebuild your BVH, right? if you're planning on doing a lot of sculpting with it. But you may also want to go back into object mode, go to the modifiers and do a decimate and take it down to whatever you think it needs to go down to. Decimate usually does a pretty good job at reducing the topology. So it's going to keep your details and it's going to get rid of like big flat areas if that's what you want to do. So it'll reduce those quite heavily. Just type in like 0.5 or something. You'll see the shading doesn't really change or nothing. So it's kind of interesting how that works. Right now it's still very triangulated in a lot of areas. So not great shading perhaps, right? All right, so with that out of the way, we go back into sculpt mode. You'll see it's still on. And certain tools just won't work with dynamic topology. So like trim tool, not supported, right? Certain things like that. Masks don't work good in these kinds of areas, so don't expect it to work. Some of the other tools, like the grab tool, for example, doesn't actually update the mesh, while Snakehook and some others will. So just pay attention to that. If you ever want to look, you can do statistics up here. Turn on that so you can see your triangle counts at least and vertices. But you can also go ahead and check this wireframe section here. Like right click it. You can assign it to a shortcut, set it to whatever you want so you can turn it on and off way faster and you don't have to worry about as many issues with that anyways. So in our case, I wouldn't use it like this right off the bat. I would probably do Snakehook. Now Snakehook, if we click and drag from a side view like that, you can see like it pulls out. Sometimes it does better than others, but a lot of times you want it to go kind of through the whole mesh. So you could do a sphere to projected and that'll pull the whole thing out like that, right? And so you can see it's already starting to get a little bit slow. I'm not a big fan of dynamic topology usually because of these kinds of reasons. But if you want to use it, you can. You can always like detail flood fill it later on if you wanted to. Constant detail flood fill. And maybe you set the resolution there for that before you do that. So that again. Maybe set it a little bit higher and then kind of work everything back that way as well if you wanted to. That's just an option for you. You can just start sculpting on these kinds of things. So I'm not too interested in preserving details. So I'm going to go to subdivide collapse and do relative, which is what we were at. And you can also do things by like brush and manual detail as well, but honestly, it's not always needed. So Snakehook, it's a big shape or this big form right here. You just have a little bit of fun real quick, kind of sculpt it out. Try to reset that BVH or rebuild BVH real quick. Maybe it'll be a little bit more performant. If not, let's take the resolution back up a little bit. See if that helps it out a bit. Not very dense. I don't usually have performance issues with it at this point, so I don't know what's going on here. Maybe it's a thing to do with Vulkan or something. But if it gives us any more problems, what we'll do, maybe the Snakehook's just too much for it with the pass-through. We'll just switch to the remesher at some point anyway, so it doesn't really matter. There's tons of tools in here we can utilize. I got tons of little tricks on how you can make them behave better or whatever the case. But in reality, you're just not going to be fiddling with as many settings as you think you are. It's not really needed for a lot of these brushes because they're set up pretty well. For example, the regular scrape tool and like the trim tool are basically the same brush. The same's true for flatten and plateau. They just have some minor tweaks to them that make them behave differently. And so, you know, these are scrapers and these are flatten tools, and they kind of work in little combos like that, usually like draw and draw sharp and then crease and crease sharp. They're basically the same brushes. So anyways, what we can do is we can get in here and just start like exploring shapes and forms quite easy and not worrying about detail yet. We're really trying to keep this thing kind of low resolution. We're not trying to go crazy with it. There's no point in going crazy just yet because we need to figure out, you know, what it is that we're going to be creating, right? And so a lot of times when you're doing a design, it's not about just free modeling and being like, oh, I'm a great artist and I create cool stuff. You need some kind of like guidance on what you're creating, some kind of prompt, some kind of, you know, idea or goal of what you're trying to create with your concept designs, right? And if you take the time to kind of write out, kind of like the way an author writes a book, right? Like what you're trying to do or achieve, is this going to be some kind of game model? Is it some kind of like armored biomech creature, or like what is it, right? You know, you got to figure it out. Is it a crate? Is it ammo can? Whenever you do that first, is it old, new, and you start setting like the who, why, what, when, where is up for it. you're going to be a little bit more successful at whatever it is you're working on, because you can start looking up references of like things. Like you can look at like things that exist in the real world, other concept designs perhaps from other um, types of multimedia entertainment stuff, or arts and media entertainment. So movies, games, whatever, and just have some fun with it. You know, don't try to like put too much pressure on yourself at this stage, because it's very exploratory. Like you can just do lots of fun stuff here, right? It's not really a big deal. Now, Blender, of course, is not ZBrush. It does not handle triangle counts the same way, but it has some basic tools in here that more or less will give you kind of a similar workflow. So dynamic topology being one of them. You just can't quite push the triangle counts as high as you probably would want to. And it can, you know, it can kind of make some of your hard surface shapes that you're trying to create become a little bit more soft. But in general, it's not really too bad of a thing, because the way it works, a lot of workflows anyways for sculpting, it goes from, it's iterative, right? Like it starts very rough, becomes a little bit more refined, a little bit more refined, and eventually you might do like a quad retopology, and then you might sculpt on top of that quad retopology. So it just keeps going. It's a very iterative process. You can always model things and start with like block out. You could do voxels on top of that and then take it to quads later. You can do Booleans along the way. You don't have to just sit here and do everything by hand. And so it just becomes a really fun process to work with when you try to use it creatively and freely, and develop your own kind of workflow that works for you, or, you know, kind of latch onto somebody's workflow that is a professional 3D artist and they're showing you how to do it. You can always do that as well. Personally, you can see I just don't like the way voxels work half the time, or dynamic topology works when it comes to the edges, but for big curvy forms, it's a good place to start anyways. So I might start like this just to get something going. I'll exaggerate my shapes a little bit, because I'm going to smooth them all down more than likely, because it's just a little bit rough for me. So then eventually I'll turn it off. I hit R, use the remesher. The remesher by default, it's pretty good. The only option here we can enable now is fixed poles. It slows down the remesh. You don't necessarily need it, but you can use that if you want. So you can hit R, change the resolution. You can hold shift to move it slower, set a size that's going to work for you, and then control R it and take it to that resolution you want, right? When we're getting started here, still keep it low. You don't have to go very high with it. You can definitely do that. Okay, and now we can actually use like mesh filter, smooth, and start doing this number, right? So we can start to round it back out. We can still see the form here. It's just not sharp or nothing like that. We can remesh it along the way and smooth it up a little bit more perhaps. Now, here's the thing about remeshing I want to point out. This object, if it was a different size, even if it's uniform scale, when we go in and we start remeshing this thing, the grid's going to look a lot different, right? And it's not always a good thing. Sometimes it's very disorienting, because you can see here, 0.07s, right? And we come over here, Alt Q, you can switch between objects. And we're still at 0.07s, but it looks much denser, right? Because it's smaller and the scale's been smaller. A lot of times your shapes, you want to work with them at ones, or reset them, Control A, apply scale, right? And you can do that. I believe you can just Alt S that as well, but you can see it kind of does a little bit different. It resets it to 1. Yeah, so let's just Control A, apply scale. And that's going to do that. So now when we hit R, sculpt mode, R, the remesher looks a little bit more appropriate. Quite good to know. If you're working with certain things like cylinders, just want to point this out, that this is not going to be high enough resolution. If you were to remesh this, you'll get a faceted mesh, okay? You can try to smooth it out, of course, but it's going to round everything else out. It's not the end of the world to do that, but it does round the top of it and the bottom of it as well. So sometimes your cylindrical pieces, you may want to just go ahead and bring them in a little bit higher density to start with, like 64 or whatever the case there. These ones, if you rotate them in object mode so you get a local rotation. The way this works out is you usually have like your global rotation. Let me view from the right and orbit out real quick. So you can see it's kind of like so, but local is going to be like this, a little bit different. And so this is great because when you're in sculpt mode, if you're ever working on something like this, right? And you have to turn on radial symmetry, it'll be on Z in our case. But if you ever turn this on, you want it to line up to this object, right? It's extremely important, in my opinion, that that can occur. So that way you can create additional details where needed while sculpting something like this, right? So then you can just remesh it, work with it, no problems. Try to dig into it if you want. You can use masks and whatever else you need to do to create these kinds of shapes, but it's going to be a little bit easier that way now, right? And so we'll have that kind of local rotation. It works out quite well. Unfortunately, when things start to rotate in the view, some of our tools don't quite work the same as they normally would. So like if we had the mask tool here, right, like box mask, it still lines up to the view, not the object, unfortunately. Maybe that'll get updated one day. We can actually do that. But until then, that's what's going to happen. So I would try to model something like this, you know, kind of with the rotation reset. You can just backspace over here. That's the in panel, by the way. Just hit in. And so you can work with multiple objects potentially. Like say, it's kind of confusing because like if I Alt D this, we could do a link duplicate. And we come over here and we start working on this one. This is both good and bad. And that's kind of what I want to point out here with link duplicates. Because like if we sculpt on this, you can see, even if we grab that and Control L, link object data, all right? Now we go back to sculpt mode. You can see it doesn't really influence it. So link duplicates doesn't really work for some reason. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm on the wrong mesh or something. Okay, I am. Yeah, I thought it was a bug, but no, it's okay. Yeah, it's supposed to update. Here we go. The trick with this is like, it's slower. Like to sculpt on sometimes, like this will cause a delay over here while sculpting. When it updates, you see how it's updating? If it's a denser mesh. Right now it's not very dense, so we can still do this. It's not too bad. But at a certain point, it's almost like it's remeshing this of sorts, and it's a little bit slow. It can cause problems. So, you know, use it with caution. Be careful with it, because yeah, it causes problems sometimes, right? Okay. That out of the way. I probably wouldn't use link duplicates right away. And instead, I would probably just do a straight duplicate with Shift D. And wherever you place this later on, you can take this one and say Shift S, cursor to select, or excuse me, you can grab this one, Shift S, cursor to selected. Using the machine tools add-on, it lines up to the local orientation. So now I can grab this, Shift S, selection to cursor, right? And it'll line up. All I got to do is delete the old one now, and I'll just replace it. If I want to update that piece, perhaps, but yeah, if you want to just do links, you can do that, I guess. So if you have multiple links going, that's where I think the things become the most problematic, perhaps, because they take a little bit, right? On the blackout, though, it probably wouldn't be that bad. Now, we got most of that going. So here's the thing. Let's do some big edits first. We'll just, we could maybe save this thing for later, just hide it. I don't know if we're going to use it, but let's just do some big edits here first. I think we're still not quite done with those. Let's say, like we already kind of did mesh filter, but we have like the trim tool, for example. We got box trim, polyline trim, lasso trim. It's the same with the mask tool. We got those same options. But let's say we do like a polyline trim. We can click, 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 drag, click, right? Okay, let's turn that symmetry off like this right here, the radial. They're going to change this in a newer version of Blender at some point, where it works on every object. Like, so if you set local, like if you set radial symmetry on one object, it doesn't work on all the objects. So it'll be local to that object, which will be nice. But till then, polyline trims, box trims, all this fun stuff's over here for us to utilize. So now we can go through, we can just cut things up, and now it's using the new Boolean manifold solver. So it's actually doing a Boolean. If you look at the topology, it looks like garbage, but it does work. And that's kind of a good thing, because all the other solvers before, when working with the trim tool, before this version of Blender anyways, just didn't work out very well. So the manifold solver, really good, but this geometry has to be solid. It cannot have holes in it. So sometimes when you're doing these Booleans, eventually it'll develop holes, and that could cause problems with the remesher. I just want to point this out, okay? So if you're ever remeshing something and it has a hole in it, and then you try to remesh it, you're going to get something like that. That's not obviously usable. You have to fill these holes, and the way you're going to do that is going into edit mode usually. The way, if I know where it's at, I'll just select the area, maybe press F, fill it, and then now we can go ahead and use a remesher again. Face sets are kind of cool. We're not going to use them a whole lot in this video. It doesn't really matter for what we're doing. But H will hide one. Shift H will kind of toggle what's visible and what's not as well. So kind of one of those things. You can do that. Now, there's an option up here to invert what's visible. So if you ever want to be like, hey, I want to work on this big white piece and this purple piece, Now you can Shift H, and you can see like you can't really work on those together. Okay, so you hide them, and then you invert, and you do that. What I did is I set invert here, just right click it, assign it to I. You go to preferences, key map. You look for key bindings if you want. You can search I after doing that, and you'll find that it's here under sculpt. You can turn off the other option for I, which is activate a brush preset, basically. So it's using one of the tools. You can turn it off if you don't plan on using that shortcut for it. And so now we're able to just hit I if we need to. And what's cool about Blender is you can modify a lot of the tools, even though they kind of don't tell you can do this. But so, for example, the 3D cursor right here, the shift right mouse button in the 3D view, you can set it to orient to the geometry and save your preferences for that. Then turn off autosave preferences after you make changes, right? So they don't, like, because for navigation, for example, if you don't autosave preferences, next time you load up Blender, it'll go back to turntable, which works better for regular modeling. This works better for sculpting. But you can change that to line up to the surface now. So if I was to, we can also Alt H to bring things back. We'll get into that in a sec. But if I was to shift right click somewhere in object mode, you see that the 3D cursor lines up to the surface now whenever I go somewhere and I click, right? Which is great, because if I want to create like a cylinder here, I can line this up to the 3D cursor now. It's just a super simple way of saving some time without having to fight your mesh all the time to get these kind of shapes in place, right? So you can do that, and then you can still use your regular tools, like I'm using machine tools, so grab those two, shift, select that one, Alt Shift X with machine tools. I can do a mirror modifier as well. So you can still sculpt on things over here if you wanted to with all that on anyways. Trying to use the trim tool there by accident. Let's use like clay strips real quick. And so maybe we set symmetries on for these on or off as well if needed. Maybe we could, or we could remesh them or whatever. Okay. Mesh filter it, smooth it. So this is quite good because you sometimes simply just, like we're working with this geo, which is okay. Let's make it a little higher resolution here. Press R and Control R. And we're going to hide those face sets for now. Face sets might be useful for converting into materials and doing quad remeshes later. It's not quite the ZBrush workflow with like Z remesher, but it's kind of close, and it's something I still got to work out some bugs with, but it's getting better, especially with Vulkan and denser geo, I think. But the main thing here is that if we want to do booleans, I'm going to be using auto booleans usually with the bool tools add-on. So Control Shift B with the bool tools add-on. Auto booleans are destructive, and a lot of your tools, by the way, if you want to update them, so for example, bool tools, in one of them, you can change which solver it uses by default. So right now I have it set to manifold by default, although you can change it to whatever you want to use. Fast is pretty quick, but less accurate. Exact's slow, but it's most accurate. Manifold's something in the middle, I think. It's pretty accurate, close to exact, and it's sometimes I think it's better than exact. But it's not as fast, all right? It's just a little bit slower, but it works really well. So I've set it there for that one. And also, box cutter. It's a little confusing. You have to activate box cutter, so Alt-W. But in here, you'll find that settings should be able to find right here under Boolean solver. Change it to manifold if you want. We can turn box cutter off now. Hard ops is kind of the same deal. It's under one of these, which is workflow. You can see non-destructive, destructive, float, okay, manifold. You can change the behavior of box cutter if you wanted to, or hard ops even, I think, but you use a destructive workflow. So when I have box cutter enabled, you can see up here, set to non-destructive. We can use destructive, and we can turn live preview off as well. So this allows us to use it something like the trim tool now, if we wanted to. We could do this number, but one of the benefits here is we can use the bevels with box cutter, okay? And so it's just going to do the cut, and there's no modifier left over right now. So it's going to do that. And if we go back, you can see it does a clean cut too. It's not too bad at all. The Boolean's a little bit different than the trim tool. But yeah, we basically have this thing going now. And we can start working with our geo in this manner. It's really quite fun. Be able to just get in here and have some fun with these things. Fire a mirror. join it to this. Oh, one thing I do want to mention. So like if we do a Boolean subtract, we'll get something like that, right? But if we do a Boolean union, it's not really needed to do unions. It's actually better to leave your mesh separated if possible. So if these are supposed to protrude, maybe we leave them protruding like that. We don't try to modify it too much. We set this back to global if we want. Local, you can access at any time by hitting Z, like in our case, Z twice. You can still do that. So we don't have to actually use local every time. We can use global, and then when we need local, just tap the axis we want twice. And yeah, so we can like move these in and out and not worry about, you know, destroying the whole mesh right off the bat. May not want to apply the mirror modifiers and stuff right away. That's fine. But if you wanted to do Boolean subtractions, you would do those. That's fine. But unions, you don't do that way. So how this works out is you take like this mesh, this mesh, this mesh, you join them together, Control J, go into sculpt mode. When you look at these, you can see they're inside of it, obviously. They're intersecting. And so if we were to remesh, see we're at 200,000, that's fine. Get back up a little bit. Control R, right? Remesh it. It's on automatic union when you remesh. Voxels, when they remesh, they don't record the inside. They don't leave objects separated. So they become one object, basically, is all I was pointing out there. And that's kind of a good thing, because now we can go around and just do whatever we got to do and just have a little bit of fun with it. And truthfully, when we're working on something like this, you can see, like, for whatever reason we did that. Don't forget to symmetrize sometimes. Blender will lose symmetry with certain tools. In our case, maybe we go the other way with that. Let's do positive X and negative X. So like Alt-Shift-A, for example, is a quick way of masking by surface. But unfortunately, yeah, it doesn't really know that you're trying to do symmetry there. And if we do this and we sculpt here, yeah, it doesn't know that. Okay, so you can do this if your object's symmetrical, and as long as it's a voxel system, you should be okay to just clear that and re-symmetrize the way you see fit, right? So, but if it's like a multi-res, for example, it's going to have a really hard time with something like that. If you're using the layers tool or the layers add-on, right? Blender does have a sculpt layers add-on, and right here, usually we use this. Well, you can use it on any mesh. But you're going to turn this kind of thing on when you're for certain you want to start adding detail more than likely, because you can't change the vertex counts. So it means no more remeshing, or the vertex order even. So no more remeshing, no more editing the mesh manually, no more trimming it up or none of that. You can only do deformations for the most part. So really cool tool, but it's for like a polishing stage, not for initial like concepting or nothing like that. So, I mean, I guess you could use it here if you plan on applying all that down, but there's no point for it yet. So maybe use that a little bit later on and just play around with some of your shapes in here and see what you can get going. Now, so references become a huge part of this if you haven't built up any kind of mental library on the different kinds of shapes and designs you want to create. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, pull up references, work with references of things that are similar, like in nature, to the thing that you're creating. You're doing weapons pieces, you're doing weapons, do that, right? You're doing biomechanical stuff, you know, use machinery and use animals or creatures. Do that. That's fun. There's nothing wrong with looking at images while working, and it can be quite helpful, even keep you from running into like art block, if you would, almost, because it's very hard to remember all the details of the world and all the little intricate things that happen out there, right? So take your time on this. Don't rush it. Like, we have kind of an interesting thing going on here, but to really spice this up and make it even more interesting and cooler, it's going to take a little bit of time, and we're going to definitely want to slow down and pay attention to the design more than creating like good topology necessarily, or even super perfect shapes or anything like that. It's really more about exploring shapes and designs and trying out variations of things and working relatively quick on various different objects, right? Because this could just be like one little piece of a whole project. It's not the whole project. That's the main thing. And so as we go through this, you know, we don't want to get caught up in these areas and struggle and suffer and all that, right? So I'm going to use a plateau tool here. We might get away with this one, might not. Plateau tool kind of flattens an area. You can see, I really don't want to mess all this up. Like, what if I want to remove this, right? We might have to do some clever scraping. We might have to do some trimming. Who knows? Like, maybe there's a way we can get this out with trimming, you know? And by the looks of it, it might be a possibility. right here. So, think creatively on how you're going to work things. I just brought it down a little bit. Maybe didn't get rid of it, but a little further down doesn't hurt, I think. So, trim it down a little bit real quick. You see, it's just not quite there yet. Remesh it. You try like fill tools. I mean, all these tools are useful. You just got to get used to using them. Like a lot of them, of course, you want to try it with different strengths, different sizes, see how it behaves. You may realize that this fill tool is the old scrape tool, by the way. The scrapers over here are kind of new. They've kind of updated them a little bit, I think, or there's just slightly different. And but the fill tool has what's called deepen, but it acts like a scraper, surprisingly. So yeah, use that thing and then can work that out a little bit. Maybe something like that. So kind of an interesting thing, little naming convention there that behavior is kind of, while it technically does, deepen technically, it definitely does behave like a scraper. So it's kind of interesting in my opinion. We can refill that area in, we can scrape it, we can fill it. Awesome, right? You can just work it back out basically. Lots of great tools in Blender. You just have to play around with them to kind of get the hang of the different ones. For example, like the clay tool. With very low strength with using your graphics tablet, it's just it's like a wax tool. It kind of melts things together. And I think that's because it has auto smooth on. Yeah. But when you use it a little heavier, it adds kind of like a little subtle layer of clay. Just kind of fun. So the clay tool, I call it the wax tool a lot of times because I think more like wax. Of course, if you crank up that strength a little bit, it'll do a little bit more. Something like that. It's kind of weird. We got some shading here that looks smooth and some shading that doesn't. Blender does that sometimes. I'm not real sure. Just right click shade everything smooth if you want. Personally, I like working with them shaded flat. So object mode, shade flat. I think that works out fine as well. So yeah, just rather interesting tools. You can use the scraper on this one. Knock it down. Scraper will dig holes a little bit, so you got to be careful with it. But we can usually work it out. We're just a bit more deliberate with what we're doing here. A lot of times you want to use your brushes and like the brushwork matters, right? So either long single strokes and adjusting your pressure by how heavy you use your hand, right? Or your strength. So long single strokes like that work out well a lot of times with different various tools. Sometimes scribble scrabble back and forth works really well. You're going to find that there's just different techniques for this. So for example, the smooth tool, crank the strength here. We use it very heavily. The smooth tool is a Laplacian smooth, so it actually flattens along normals under the circle here, this little circle. And so it's going to flatten that area basically. So you can do this to purposefully create chamfers if you really wanted to. But anytime you go across a hard edge, it will round it basically. It smooths it out. So you do have to be careful with that, but it's quite useful for just doing kind of a chamfer on a normal there, if you would, or an edge. I find it to be one of those tools you might want to use for that. The smooth tool of all things, right? The scraper will do the same, but it's a little bit more like it just feels not as broad maybe. So it's a little bit different than the way it used to be. It's not a bad thing. You can actually use it somewhat like an H polish brush, believe it or not, by changing the normal radius down. You don't really need to change a whole lot other than that. Maybe the strength, keep it a little bit lower. And you can kind of do these little circles with it like this. Maybe a little back and forth motion as well with the topology there. And it'll kind of just go right up to that edge now and create like a little section there while we can scrape the middles out a little bit. And if you're not careful, you'll get a lumpy surface as well, but use it larger if you want as well. So what that normal radius does is it tries to focus on that dot in the middle more than the outside of the circle. So if we go over edges, you can see, like if we go up to the edge now, it won't start affecting that edge until we get real close to it. Okay. So like way out here, it's still going to be good. There's the plateau tool, which is basically the flatten tool. I don't really use the flatten tool a whole lot because I don't find it that useful. But the plateau tool I do, because what it does is it's locked to the normal and the plane here, stabilizes them. And so if we start using this, it will completely flatten a surface based off of that normal and that plane. So you can see towards the symmetry, it gets a little bit weird. But if you go over an edge, it fills it, right? But if you dig from like here to there, it'll start to flatten this area inwards, which is quite nice. The trim tool does something kind of similar, except right now it's only locked to the normal. Okay, we'll do the plane in a second, but it does something very similar. So wherever we're going to start with something like this, let's say we start right here. You see the circle direction? Like it's laying on the surface a little bit. When we start here like this and we move it inwards, that circle stays in that same direction. Okay, that's what the normal does. Now, if we change to stabilize plane, the plane is kind of like we can't move in now, right? But we can still keep that circle in that direction, but we can move it forward and backwards. Okay, so that's what the flatten tool is doing, or plateau tool is doing basically. The only difference here with these two is that this doesn't go over edges, right? See if I can get it to actually work. Like if I go up here, and I wanted to flatten this area. Maybe not a great example there. I'm going to find an example. Let's start down here then. If I go up here, it doesn't go over that edge, right? It doesn't fill. Okay, that's the difference. So that's really useful sometimes if you need to make those kinds of shapes. But you can also fill with it if you really wanted to. But you have to tell it to do that by holding control. And you can do the same as the plateau tool on purpose, basically. So really a cool tool to modify. You might want to actually duplicate that brush and create a new one and set that up. But yeah, so sculpting in Blender, while not as robust as ZBrush or maybe even some other sculpting software out there, but the main thing is it is usable. It's workable. We can obviously, you can see we're creating shapes already. And we can just keep working it for a while and just come up with all kinds of crazy stuff. Now, don't worry about being fast with it. Try to keep things very low resolution at first. These should be able to be worked as a blockout piece, or basically you can start constructing really complex looking objects using dozens, if not hundreds of different parts and pieces. Using meshes like this, they don't have to be more dense than this, right? 200,000 is pretty high already. You can actually even leave them much lower than that. It really wouldn't matter. The only time you want to go higher resolution is when you're trying to turn them into quads and you're going to use some kind of automated system like quad remesher, right? And even that doesn't work out perfect. Otherwise, you're going to retopo these kinds of things and turn them into quads that way. So when quad remesher doesn't work, using another workflow I might show in another video, usually I often have to revert to just doing things manually. And so learning to do that by default is quite useful. And then later on, you can play around with the idea of like face sets and quad remesher and trying to maintain a surface and all of its details and stuff. It gets really complex and doesn't always work out anyways. So one of those things now, right? The draw tool. Let's talk about this. We got like these smooth curves in some areas. You can see we're flattening some out, create chamfers. It's not really a big issue. The issue that a lot of guys run into with sculpting hard surface is a lot of times you have these round shapes like this and you want to create sharp edges, right? So if you have an object or a surface that is beveled or curved and it has edges like this going on, like how do you unbevel something? That's really kind of critical here. And it's really simple. It's like taking all this geo here in Alt-A with machine tools, like an align to the right. See? And that just unbevels that whole area instantly. And we can actually do that over here at the front too. Just align it to the left. Now we AX limit dissolve, boom. Now we've unbeveled a corner like that, maybe. And so how do we do that with sculpting, right? It's the same idea. We're just going for, if I can find a good corner here to work on. We're just going to be going for, let me use the annotate tool for a moment. We want to keep this surface coming out. Oh, annotate tool is set to not going to work right there. Okay, I don't know why. It's gone to the 3D cursor. Let's do view for a sec. We're trying to hit a point somewhere here. So we're trying to sculpt something like this with the draw tool or crease sharp or crease polish tool. Sometimes you have a little dip here. You might have to work that out a little bit right there. When you smooth that, well, if you smooth this area, not the tip here, that'll flatten out a little bit right there. Okay, and that'll flatten out a little. So that's how we're going to use this. This is the technique anyway. That's all I'm getting at. So when we look at this mesh, we're going to use just the regular draw tool, nothing special here. Use a lot of guys like to use crease polish because it pulls geometry towards the edge. But the regular draw tool, even if we nudge here a little bit, you see as you go further in the background there, the spacing starts to show up. So be careful with that. It's going to happen. You don't want to work at things at weird angles like that, usually off into the distance. But this piece here, like if we pull this up a little bit, you see, like we can start to work it out to the appropriate area that we want it. And then we can do a little bit of a fill as well, right? So we can kind of knock that in a little bit and then smooth it. Remember, the smooth tool is a flatten tool, right? If you want it to behave that way. Don't go over the edge, we won't mess that area up. A little smaller maybe. And as a result, we can work this very deliberately to a tiny little point if we wanted and get a hard edge. Okay. That's all you got to do. I mean, it's really this easy. So you can kind of like free model this almost. And like if you're using crease sharps, it's quite incredible actually, because you can just kind of be like, you know, I want to do this number through here. And I want to do this number through here. And while it's not perfect, maybe you slightly pull it up a little bit more, smooth it out. See, it's still not perfect. We're going to have to work that one a bit. Plus, the smooth tool is way too strong right now, so it's trying to flatten things. I don't want it to. I want to Shift F this and turn it down. Maybe use the crease polish so it's not so sharp. And we can start to work this out in this area a little bit. Try to get it corrected again real quick, because we kind of messed it up, but the main idea is that we can get this kind of an edge going. Crease polish is really good, by the way. Also, we have different stroke methods I want to point out. A lot of times I'm going to end up using spacing or line and also dots, okay? Alt-E will let you access those very quickly. Shift-S will turn on stabilized stroke. So Shift-S turns that on. You get a lazy mouse now. You can modify this by turning this up and down, right? Down will make it more responsive, obviously. And usually got to tweak both of them like so. And then up, of course, will delay everything. I'm going to right-click, reset those, or you can hit backspace. But you can turn it on with Shift-S and turn it off with Shift-S. So it's really quite useful. Now you can do that number, right? Smooth all that out maybe. As needed. Maybe make the brush a little bit bigger. All right, we don't need to get too precise here right now, but the main idea is that we can now use this very, very deliberately. Get the perfect curves and everything like that. Smooth everything out as needed. And go through this setup here, right? Then we can also smooth on the inside and work that area out as well. Take our time with this stuff, guys. It's really easy to get overwhelmed. It's quite good like that, right? Now, something I didn't mention here, or kind of mentioned but I didn't go over, was that smoothing. We got it full strength now. We come in here. You can see it does flatten a surface. But what are we actually doing here with smoothing? It's removing, like, think of it as like removing a little bit of material. It's like a sander, basically. So if you just work a sander back and forth like this long enough with like a block sander, it's going to do that. So when people are working on woodwork and they're doing like tables, they often go left and right with like a belt sander. And then they'll go the opposite way like that. And that'll help create a flat surface, basically, with a little finesse to it, perhaps. Now, because we're in digital here and we can not using a belt sander necessarily, we can also do little circles like this, very lightly, by the way, not full strength. And what this acts like is an orbital sander. And orbital sanders are better for curved surfaces, generally speaking. And belt sanders are better, or like block sanders, in those left and right, up and down motions. It's better for flat surfaces, and circles are better for the curved surfaces. Also, low strength. Something that's kind of interesting is if you've ever worked on anything with a sander like that, what happens is you oftentimes have to have like a sponge underneath the sandpaper. The reason for that is otherwise the edges dig into the corners. And so you can think of this as kind of the result you would get if you didn't have, like if you had no softening, if you would, to that sandpaper. So it won't give you a nice clean result. It'll kind of dig into the surfaces. Now, if you turn the strength down, that's the equivalent of adding a sponge. That's the way I like to look at it. So you can compare these things to kind of like real life, real world stuff. And how you're going to work with it, right? Now, of course, there's all kinds of tools in real life we don't have access here into Blender. Like scrape multiplane is actually quite good. Normally, if you just click on it, it's just like, it's okay. Like it kind of pinches together. But if you hold control, it just stays flat, and you can use it like a knife almost and kind of scrape or graze at a surface. This is actually really good because what automotive designers, when they're doing those clay models of vehicles, what they're usually doing is they're using some kind of scrapers like this, but they're not just completely flat necessarily. They're like slightly curved and whatnot, and they're flexible so they can actually adjust the curves while they're working with it. So this reminds me a lot of that. And because of that reason, it's really good for just kind of creating these like cutout shapes like this and working out bevels maybe. and just having a little bit of fun with it. You don't really have to, like you can do chamfers or bevels or whatever the case. It's very predictable in a way. It's a really cool tool that most people don't talk about in Blender a whole lot, but you'll definitely want to try to picking it up and learning how to use it, because you can also try to tighten up corners with it perhaps as well. Maybe not as effectively as you'd want. There are brush settings for this, I believe, that you can change, like the plane angle and stuff like that. So if you want to tweak it, modify it, go for it. Blob tool, instead of doing cylinders and booleans, a lot of people look at the blob tool and think like, what the heck are we going to use that for unless we're doing some kind of crazy characters or creatures. Actually, the blob tool is really good. Let's use plateau real quick. You get right in the center of this. You turn them into little shapes like this super fast by doubling them up, basically. So blob followed by that. You can go the other way with it too by holding control, right? So you do that. Maybe use a plateau or scrapers, and you get this, right? So really quick, easy way of adding kind of a cylindrical detail. Not a big deal. A lot of your tools, you can use all kinds of different little tricks like that. So like custom fall off on the draw tool, make it very sharp. Now I can hit Alt-E. Instead of using spacing, we'll use drag dot. Now we can just drag this around like this, Shift F to change the strength. So we can also do this very fast as well. Now someone's going to ask this, I've seen it before, where can you keep the brush the same size whether you're zoomed in or out or not? Because as you can see, if we zoom in, this is going to be this size. If we zoom out, it's this size. Big difference, right? Now, normally, I would say don't worry about it too much, because Blender does have an option to change the radius here to behave different. So we could do like a scene setting, right? And we can change the size here. So we'll always have the same size, or so we think. It doesn't always keep the same size necessarily, but it tries to. And so it usually works out okay. There's times I will use something like that. And there's times I just don't really care. I think you can just, adjust your brush size real fast, and you don't have to worry about it being slightly off maybe, right? It's little things like that that start to add up. And for me anyways, I don't like fiddling around with that too much. So that's an option for you though, if you want to use it, so go for it. We'll revert my asset here. So the brush menu over here is the only place you can reset these as far as I'm aware of. So my regular sculpt draw tool, I'm just going to reset. But any of your tools you can reset over there at any time. Also very useful. If you ever get tired of, for example, like the F key here, we changed the sculpt draw tool to some kind of size. And like the smooth tool, for example, we want much larger or something. Or maybe we want it smaller, who knows. We can unlink the radius here by turning this guy off. Okay. And sometimes this is useful, but sometimes it's not. Certain brushes you might want to use small, but anyways, it's going to do that globally for all your brushes. So now the draw tool, we can keep really small. Our smooth tool, we can make really large. And we should see that when we smooth, it should remain large. At least it was last time I was doing this, but it might not be doing it right now. Okay. Yeah. I don't know how I got it to do it last time, but yeah, it was doing it. So anyways, it's the same size right now, apparently. That's okay. The other brushes will be different sizes though. Like draw sharp, for example, regular draw tool. So when we toggle between them now, yeah, they're not linked up together. Quite useful in my opinion. But it actually becomes a little bit of a pain if you're zooming in and out a lot. And now you're changing brushes as well. You're going to be like doubling the amount of work in order to keep everything going. So optional, keep that on or off, up to you. Now, anyways, I'm going to smooth some of this out, kind of get it going. I think it's too high resolution still. We're not ready for detail like that maybe just yet. Maybe we are, who knows. And so we can mesh filter smooth. And I'm clicking and dragging to the right. You can use a mouse instead of your pen. Let's keep dragging to the right for a little while here. You see how fast or how long it takes to smooth that down? If we had a lower resolution mesh, and we did that, it smooths much faster. Okay, so lower resolution, maybe not keeping the hard edges as well, but it will be more workable for a little while at least. The Booleans work faster, the remesher works faster, the smooth tools, the smoothing and the flattening tools, they all work a little bit faster basically. Or they feel a little bit stronger maybe. Much better for blocking out in general. And so while we could use draw tool for now, if we made it small enough, it might work out pretty well. We can try to do a lot of work with that sculpt draw sharp or crease sharp even. You see how those work out, maybe lower the strength a bit. These can be quite good. Let me use draw sharp because we can kind of doodle with them and sharpen up some of these edges, right? You're trying to do the same thing. You're not trying to pull this surface up necessarily. You're trying to more or less do that same beveling and unbeveling technique that I was showing you. And you can go through, and if you're clever with this, you can do like little strokes to do those little extra areas, and then just smooth out to that area basically, right? And so like right here, I want this to remain beveled. I don't want to flatten this too much. So what I'm going to do is just maybe sharpen here and then lightly nudge that area together. Hopefully we can work that out, but it's so low res, I don't think we'll see a difference. So, and because of that reason, we can now go around and just quickly work these kinds of things, and even add a little bit of like tertiary detail to them, perhaps. Now, it's not, you're not going to be able to hold that detail. You're going to have to retop with a big base form and then cut in the detail again later on. Or you'll have to clean it up later at a higher resolution sculpt. But for the most part, I think you get the idea. You can get through this and have a little bit of fun with it. We're just kind of redoing what we had. I'll dig that one in a little. Okay, so that's just kind of some things we can do there. Oh, let's go over the mask tool real quick. We haven't got into that as detailed as I probably should have. So masking is a lot of fun. By default, it's using spacing and pressure sensitive strength. I wouldn't use the strength unless you're doing something very organic and you need to blend things in and out. With the mask, holding shift will blur, right? But a lot of times using it full strength is okay. Let me make this a little bit stronger, actually. A little bit more vertices here that we can work with. Yeah, we'll go up a little bit resolution. So we can see what's happening with the mask a little bit better. And so sculpt draw works pretty well, except if you're very far, or excuse me, mask draw or whatever you want to call it. If you're using it very far out and it's a big brush, it's going to have like these softer edges. But if you zoom in, make it a smaller brush, obviously it sharpens up. This can be a little bit of a problem or kind of a good thing if you plan on doing that. Holding control, going back later and removing it a little will help that out to sharpen it up. But if you don't want it blurry, it's a little bit of an issue, perhaps. When you have something that's blurry as a mask, there's a way to sharpen them up. So like something like that. You can press A. This is the pie menu for masks. You can increase contrast, not invert, increase contrast. And then you turn auto iterations off and then just crank this value up or down as needed. And you can sharpen them basically, okay, when they're blurry. Sometimes they come out better than other times, but that's just the main idea there. Also, when you're using certain tools like polyline, not polyline trim, polyline mask, right? You might want to use front faces only. Now, a little caveat to this one. Just because we're using front faces only doesn't mean it only works on these front faces here. If these are facing towards us, those are considered front faces as well. So if we start cutting out a mask, you'll see all of that gets grabbed too, okay? So it doesn't work the way you think it does. It's better to use it as a cut through type of mask and then maybe work things out from there. In my opinion, you end up something like this. It's very faceted. This does matter. Masks need to be very precise a lot of times, even at low resolution, so that you have nice clean edges, right? This is so when you retopo it, it just looks right, okay? It doesn't have to be very clear, but it needs to be clean. There's a big difference. So let's say if I press A and I smooth this mask, right? We can change the amount it smooths, just like before. It's blurry now. We can increase contrast again after. We can do this number. Now the trick here, if we smooth it very heavily, like a lot, and then increase contrast, what we're seeing happen is we're rounding out this corner here, and anything along the curve here will start to kind of smooth out as well. So that's really good that we can do that. So now we can invert the mask, you see? And that's pretty cool to do that, right? We can just now sculpt in this area if we wanted to, but we can also do other things like mesh filter and set to inflate. We can do that number again. You can see it does start to, we inflate too much in the wrong direction there. Doesn't work. Inflate in this way. Yeah, it works, but it looks pretty rough. You have to clean these kinds of things up a lot of times, which is a little bit rough, right? Now, here's the thing. We can use the move, rotate, and scale tool. So if we move, we can kind of move it around if we wanted to. We're going to have some of the same issues. Let's increase contrast for a second. Make it a little bit rough, a little bit sharper. Let's see, it does like so. But if we smooth it quite a bit, what we'll find is it creates like a rounded effect. It's more like it's beveled in these areas. So that can be quite good. And a higher resolution doing these deformations are easier to clean up, in my opinion. But it's still not too hard right now. Anyways, the gizmo is way over here, though. Maybe you don't want to use the gizmo over there. That's the problem you're going to run into. Sculpt, set pivot. This one here, right-click it, set it to shift right mouse, and save your preferences so you always have it. Now you can move it around with shift right mouse. So shift and top barrel button on your graphics tablet. Because we can move it around like this now, we can also rotate it, and we can control where it's going to rotate from. That's the main thing that you're going to want to use that for. Also, the same is true for scaling. So we can scale it out from there, or we can scale it to here. It's up to us. So we have different options there. You can scale it all down maybe, or scale it up. All kinds of crazy stuff like that, right? All right, so I don't really like that edit. I'm not going to do it, but I think you get the idea. And so we can use that mask tool now fairly efficiently. We can go through here, and you can see like from a side view, it just goes to the top and dies. Change sphere to projected. We can go all the way through the mesh with these as well. So we can go through and we can mask something, do something like that, maybe Shift S, do a little bit of that. Then we can Shift S it again. Whoop, went to edit mode. It looks like a shoe, doesn't it? If we A, invert it, mesh filter, A, smooth, crank up the smoothness. You see we can do that, maybe. It didn't quite work out the way I wanted. Might want to scale towards the center a little bit. So scaling towards the center is a little tricky because sometimes, you know, you can't reposition this in the center, right? Because it goes to surface now. So you have to place it maybe where you think the center is in one view, and then use the axes in the middle there, which is kind of the way to go with that one. If you ever run into that issue, you can always like scale it back and do some fun stuff like that as well. So really just cool stuff we can do here. Ultimately, I think the more you sculpt, the more fun you'll have with it, because while it does feel slow and kind of rough at first, it starts to pick up speed when you realize you're not trying to do perfect mesh, right? Like we're not at the point here. We're not even going to get to that point here in this video where we're trying to create perfect meshes off of something like this. We're trying to create a base mesh that we can start to kind of see what we want to do, maybe even add some detail to it. And then that way we can actually start to work on a high poly mesh of something like this later on. So you see, don't forget to turn projected off. It's going to mess you up if you don't. But we can get in here at some point. We can start to work a mask out in this area. We can change the brush size as needed now. Shift S, turn that off. Alt E and using dots is like full strength mask. There's no blend to this one at all. And so you'll always have to, more than likely, you'll always have to go smooth it and increase contrast. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a little bit hard to work with sometimes. But sometimes it's really good as well because you want to create very purposeful kind of masks and things like that. So you can see like it's hard to blend some of them together sometimes. So might use spacing for a bit. And do this. And spacing has a drawback that even if you don't have pressure sensitive strength on, the stroke starts soft and ends soft because of the spacing. So like if you had strength on, it's even worse, right? Like you can blend things almost by accident. So you got to be careful of that one because it will show up when you try to inflate or move things. And so a lot of times this one, even you have to increase contrast on it and then smooth it and maybe increase contrast again. You can see where that goes. We get some nonsense like this going, right? So might be something you have to do, and it's unfortunate, but it's reality. So I just want to kind of cut out some shape in here. Something that makes a little bit more sense, maybe. And I was planning on doing that a little bit different right there, but maybe we don't. Yeah, I probably should do it different. You would want to make these evenly spaced. I always say that creating designs is like creating fonts. You got to really think about what you're doing. Try not to overdo it. Take your time, have fun. Don't rush it. When you're learning, when you're practicing, when you're trying to become a better artist, it's not about going super fast right away. It's about taking your time, getting a good workflow, kind of established, and you'll pick up speed as you work on more and more projects. And follow your tutorials and kind of watch other guys time-lapse sculpt things maybe in ZBrush or something. See what they're doing, kind of pick up on these little odd and ends here. A lot of them, when they're doing the block out section like this in ZBrush, you can still follow along very easily. They'll just be at a higher resolution more than likely. At least a little bit, not much. So you can see something like that. I don't know if I want to try to inflate that. That wouldn't make much sense to try to do that, right? So maybe I smooth it a bit, not that much, just a little bit. Then maybe I move it in from here. You see, one of the downsides of the move tool is it doesn't always have the gizmo line up the way you want. So you just got to kind of free move things sometimes. And you can see it's a little bit more adjustable perhaps than you realize just by free moving things, right? Remesh it as needed. Clear the mask if needed. So yeah, you can do things like this all day. Really not that difficult. At some point, even on something like this, you're going to want to work on separate objects. You see that the way I drew this line from this angle, it actually looks more curved, which is kind of interesting, right? But you're going to probably want to work on separate objects at certain points. You don't always work on the same thing over and over and over again. You're going to want to create some asymmetry as well at some point. So toggle this thing on and off. Try some asymmetry designs as well. Maybe duplicate it first before you do that, so that way you can always just revert back to this if you screw up. Always a good idea to, you know, shift E and duplicate something real quick. And what am I doing there? Moving the whole object. Wrong tool. Object mode, maybe. Shift E and duplicate, hit X. So now something like this, maybe you can get in here and say, like, you know, I want to try to knock out mask here. In this area, maybe we want to just cut it into the surface about halfway or something. All right, let's change that to dots and then Shift S, turn that off. So instead of doing like a Boolean, maybe we just sculpt in a big cavity here. And we could try to work with that, maybe. See, that little bit of waviness will actually show up. Even like that little discrepancy there. Those will show up. Even if you smooth it a lot and increase contrast, sometimes they won't go away. So you got to be very careful setting up your masks. Convert that. Just use the draw tool now. See what we can do here. Use it rather large. A lot of times I like to do something like this, and I kind of work the inside edges a little bit first. Then I'll just remesh it. And then this whole area, we might be able to smooth out or plateau or something now. Get a good normal there, maybe. Flatten along it. Edges will be pretty janky. That's okay. We can always clean them up. So we can remesh it again. Some guys like to just shrink or grow the mask, right? In our case, it's a shrink the mask, actually. You see, it's going to work, sort of, but it's kind of nasty. Maybe increase contrast first and then try that. Maybe that's not going to work for us. It's kind of destroyed at this point. There's actually a little technique to do that, and I always forget it, but it's like a combo of like shrink, grow, and mesh filter. The Blender, what's his name? The guy that does Blender secrets. That guy, his YouTube channel, he has that tutorial somewhere on there on how you could do that. There's a couple different methods, and something to think about, right? Doing it manually, though, is not the end of the world. Just do it lightly and get it all worked out, you know? Try not to create little lumpy surfaces and stuff like that. And that'll help you during a retopo process if you're going to retopo this. Usually retopo, you're not going to use a shrink wrap. Like you could if you wanted to, but it doesn't make as much sense with this kind of a sculpt because it's just not high detail. It's not super smooth, perfect surfaces, so you're not going to use it in that manner. You're going to just go around and just retopo it by putting some mesh on top, and then you'll go through, and if you turn it into subdivision mesh, you'll use either creases or holding edges, those kinds of things. And you can start to work these kinds of things out in those manners. Now, I was going to put a cylinder in here. I don't think that even fits in that shape like that, but let's try it anyways. So, kind of view from this side, and we'll try that. Add a little bit, R and X. So yeah, we can go into edit mode and scale on Z twice. get it in the right shape or the right area, the right shape. We want to make sure that we don't do the scales, right? Apply scales. The rotation should be fine. The most part, I think this is okay-ish, but it's just a little too far in, maybe. Press Y twice on that one. You can see also it just wants to rotate slightly this way. And that's kind of cool, but you know, once again, we're going to run into this problem where it's really hard to work on it at this angle with the tools in Blender. Right now, I'm going to tell you, just Alt-D that one out, reset the rotation. This is what you want to sculpt on, guys. So get in here. If you want to remesh it, R, Control R, you can do that. Going to remesh that one. Low resolution mesh, once again, instances, link duplicates, they're not really that big of a deal. So we can get in here and crank on our settings. Let's just do 3 for now. Maybe we use the draw tool, or we can scrapers or whatever we got to use here. And what I really want to do is I kind of want to use the trim tool. I want to set it back to default. That way, I want to trim here down. I can do that. Hopefully it works out, right? I really just want to go to the bottom and just kind of work it into that cylindrical shape. That's not working exactly the way I want it to. We do a little bit lighter at first, and then we try to take it lighter. All right, so we can remesh that. It's not really pretty. Let's smooth it down a bit. And so maybe we just do that for now. Kind of fitting in there, kind of not. I don't know about it. I don't know how I feel about this one just yet, guys. So, you know, taking your time and creating a good concept, you can spend some time sculpting. I think some of the older ZBrush tutorials out there where you see guys like dynamic topology sculpting, they have some real benefit to it. Is that a bug or what's going on here? Too large? The scrape tool? Do I have it set? Oh, I have it set to scene for some reason. Okay. Like, I was like, is that a... No, that's what happens. Scene's a little bit confusing sometimes. So, no. Watch some of those older ZBrush videos with like just pure dynamic topology sculpting, or even in Blender. You'll see guys kind of doing this stuff. And now you'll be able to recognize it, right? That's the main thing. So, being able to just go for it, playing around with shapes and forms and designs and remeshing, and then using your various tools. Like, we can get in here still, if I can get in here still. Gotta gesture correctly. Now, the like the box mask, for example, guys, how easy is that? You just box mask it, maybe mesh filter, inflate, A, invert. And you could do things like this all day, right? So if we want to remesh that, plate, maybe we remesh a little higher, plate, maybe we can smooth it a little better now. Okay. We can make like a little propane tank or something out of this. I don't know what it's going to be, but you get the idea, right? We can do this all day long. And we don't just stop here and just like be like, this is the one all be all, right? We can create more things to add to this, perhaps. In our case, maybe we want to add a little bit more to it. We want to do like another cylindrical shape. And this is where the fun begins, right? Now you're starting to understand, like, we're not doing something wrong here by doing this. This is actually kind of like a blockout concept piece. We can have a lot of fun with it. We can do poly modeling. We can do sculpting. We can do whatever we want, guys. It is not the end of the world on this project. So if I join that to that, we don't even do a Boolean. We just join it and remesh it, clear it, boom. Maybe we remesh a little bit higher resolution. Usually I try to keep it above that 32-sided cylinder resolution, but it depends on the size of this as well. So you can see it's starting to work in this area. Not perfect, but it's starting to get there. So we can just sculpt as well, like regular sculpting on like one object or the other. We can Alt-Q between them. I want to sculpt on this piece, and now we can just use like the draw tool. We can work out these edges here a little bit. It's hard to see what's going on, especially with wireframe. These objects, usually you can assign material to it like this, like the default setup for Blender. You could assign a material, and you can make one that's like transparent kind of by going to down here to the bottom. You can go to viewport display. And let's just make this blue for a second so we can see it's working, right? You turn alpha down, right? So if you ever find a need for that, you can do that. You can assign a material in the viewport. When you're using material, you make that happen. Now, everybody that watches my channel, you already know I have what the add-on I created called Object Color add-on. It's really not special. It's using object colors, right? So object. And because of that, usually this setting is in here, viewport display. There's your object colors. You change this here too, make it blue. And you can also turn the alpha down. It does the exact same thing, is what I'm getting at. So if you wanted to do that there, you could. Personally, I like to stay in the settings here or in the modifiers area. It's one of the others. Now, but you'll notice I have that add-on. That just puts that box up here. It's actually going to be down here. I got to pin it up there or whatever, reorder it. And so, but now I can change colors and alpha values on any given object. And if I want to just kind of set it back to white, there you go. Now we're good. And so this is like gray, of course, using a white matte cap could be useful as well, because now you can actually separate your objects just a tiny bit by getting them different values or different colors even. So if this is supposed to be like explosive canister, and that's how you take down some kind of joint on a mech or something, you got to shoot it. There you go. Now you get the idea, right? Like we can do these kinds of things. We can have a lot of fun creating concept design. And yeah, we can create joints in multiple parts. We can even use parts we've already created and go into sculpt mode and just modify them a little. Maybe we want to make them a little bit larger or scale them in certain ways. And when we're scaling in sculpt mode or edit mode, it doesn't mess up the scale there. So that's not a bad deal. And then you can always go back over this real quick and make some minor adjustments as well. Like maybe we want to scrape this piece off here and do something more like this. You can see I don't have symmetry on right now. I know this part was symmetrical, so let's do that. Maybe I just scrape this down a little bit. Do that. Maybe I do some polyline masking. Did it keep resetting on me? It seems like that's... Maybe it did. Let's do a polyline mask here. Okay, and then maybe I take that and I smooth it quite a bit. Smooth it. And then we can increase contrast a little bit. Okay, invert it, mesh filter, inflate. You're going to be dancing around with your tools a lot, but basically all I'm showing is that you can get a variation going. Right? And if you want, you can, like maybe we don't want that little cut in this one, right? We clear the mask. And now all we got to do is make sure you're in sculpt mode, symmetry right here. We can symmetrize however we choose or see fit. Maybe we want it to do that. Maybe we want to go the other way. That, get that little crevice there. Now we could try filling this with the fill tool. Nothing wrong with that, right? Fill deepen. Usually works, by the way, fairly well. It might cause a little bit of issues right at the surface level, but it usually fills those big holes very fast. Like that. Now you can also just add geometry to it like a cube. Not the end of the world to do that either. Try to get a good view here going. Okay. And I just scale it down, rotate it a little, maybe scale it. Whatever we got to do here. Move this face down. Some things like that. Extrude that. Apparently we were way over there. So let's take this and align it to this. Now there's vanilla blender way. Grabbing this, shift selecting that. Objects, transform, line to line objects. And you can see line mode centers relative to active. And we can do, like, say, in this case, X. Boom. If we want both, we can do hold shift and hit Y as well. But we're not doing that Y. We're just doing X. You can do high quality if you want. Yeah. And now we can just scale that in. Right, and so you can see where that's going to go. Basically, we're able to work this out. We bevel that. And maybe we bevel this one too, right? Oh, we got doubles AM merged by distance. So modeling at the end of the day, right? That. It's okay-ish. Let's take this It's a little hard to poly model while using that view that way. Give you a heads up here. But it is possible. We're going to symmetrize this one, and we can do that in edit mode, I believe, and sculpt mode. So we do that with a menu up here. It should add it over here, I think. But so we just got like a little taper to the edge there. That's cool. That's kind of a good thing. We could even bevel this, like with hard ops. If you wanted, get a preset bevel going, then just apply it or convert it to a mesh. You're good to go. Join it to this, Control J. Already, it's like super clean. So if you have the choice between, like if it's more cubic shapes or you know you can handle it with Boolean n-gon workflow, do that. If you know it's easy to subdivision model, then do that. If you're just wanting to explore things and use voxels that you know you're going to have to remesh later on or retopo, then do that. I mean, like this is more exploratory, obviously. But this is a pretty clean shape. You don't necessarily always need to, like this piece down here, obviously wanted to sculpt, but if it's something more like this one, just model it. I mean, that's the easier way to go. Right? Just Control R it. I think it's a little high resolution at 300,000, so I'm going to keep that in check just by adjusting it to a value I want. Not really a big deal. Some of those deformations there as well, you can see they just kind of make the surface a little bit rougher, perhaps. Oh, we got symmetry on it. Oh, I got symmetry. Oh, no, that's that. I mean, I can't wait for them to change that one. I think that one was always a problem for. So, hope they add it to. I hope they can add it to 3.5 somehow. That'd be awesome. Certain things I really want to see in this version that I know are coming up. That might be one of them. We're using scraper, not smooth. Let's use smooth. All right, we'll get through this at some point. Sure. Smooth tool once again. Just add a little chamfer edge here or there. Could be quite useful. It could look really. One of the few tools that won't dig further than it should. I don't know what happened here. Wondering if the smooth tool will actually fix that. Very bizarre to have that little point there, right? Let's try scraping that one down. Got to repair the area. We can do that. Lower resolutions sometimes are easier to repair compared to the highs. And so I'm going to remesh it real quick. Use a regular draw tool for a second. I know I want this to come up a little here. That's smooth. So like it might not be perfect, but it could be pretty close if we want it to be. Right? That's kind of the deal here. You really want to try to get them as well as you can, but sometimes it goes a little bit hayward or rough there like that. The light touch, guys, just very light touch. A little finesse involved to all of this. But if you can pull off what I'm showing you here in this video, you're golden. This is all perfect kind of mesh for retopo purposes. You just go through, you can start remeshing it. You can add additional detail if you want it as well, like you just want to add panel lines and cuts and things like that, or patterns or other objects or whatever the case. Like you can do these things at this really a big deal. Oh, the whole point of this piece, anyways, we're kind of left getting sidetracked by sculpting on it. Was just to prove, like you can see our circular shapes have become now oval shapes, but it's just to prove that you can use these in combination with each other. You can still mirror these, hitting Control M, X, Y, Z, or middle mouse clicking is a fast way to do that as well. It's going to invert your scale, so Control A, apply scale. It's going to invert your normals. If you don't see that, you need backface culling on. All right. Then, so go into edit mode, Alt N, flip your normal. That's a good piece now. And so we can use these in combination with each other. Like this doesn't necessarily have to be as thick. It could be a little thinner, maybe. You can play around with these ideas. Lighter for now. We can maybe delete. And that's just kind of the thing about this whole process, this whole workflow. It's really not that hard to get into. It's a lot of fun. And as you get used to doing this, you'll kind of become spoiled by it because you can create things that you can just like see. Like a lot of guys run into this issue with design anyways. Oh, here's a fun one that popped up right here. I don't know when it occurred. I'm pretty sure it'll occur again if I remesh. So if I take this and I hit non-uniform scale, see? Control A, apply scale. R, okay. Control R. Okay, you see the dots showing up? This thing is annoying, right? Like Blender should not do that, but it does. And what does it? Now I've shown in the past, you can actually kind of fix these things by using the relax slide tool. You kind of slide them out basically, okay? Really easy to get rid of, But sometimes they show up, like a lot of them. Sometimes there's things that you can't relax slide that show up, where it's like a bunch of just really bad looking geo. But what's happening is every time we hit Control R and we remesh, it's going to start creating those things. The solution here is to Control Z back and then hit R and hold Shift. Just change the number by 1 or 2 in either direction, up or down, and then Control R again. It won't do it. Okay. Blender needs kind of like the voxel remesher, anyways. Should fluctuate, I think, in my opinion, up and down every time you hit Control R, so that it avoids that situation. If the Blender devs would start doing that, I think that would be amazing, because otherwise you get those little dots everywhere and it could destroy your mesh. So it took me a while to figure out what was going on there, but yeah, up and down, fluctuate the that'll help you out quite a bit. So yeah, we basically now have a good mesh compared to what I said that earlier. It didn't really mean anything, but it wasn't true, I guess. Let's talk about the layer tool, and we'll probably end this video here. Well, maybe we'll talk a little bit about retopo, but then we'll end the video. Layer tool is really cool. You can right click, change the height, or you can just go to the brush settings and change it up here as well. It just lays in a level change going up on the surface, basically, right? So that's really nice, but if you start another one, it does another and another. Could be good if you want to work with that in that manner, but you also have the option of turning persistent base on and setting persistent base. So now when you do some stuff like this, you can go around, make this happen, no problem. Let's just fill all that in. We could do like little panels and stuff like this if we really wanted to, or little extrusions. I think panels are easier to do with like the tool, draw sharp tools and things like that. But you'll see, I can't work on this anymore. That's what persistent base does. I can work out of it though. I can hold Control and even erase that area now. It doesn't always work flawlessly. It does have errors or issues sometimes, but for the most part, it's pretty usable. There's times I still do use this. Depends on what I'm working on and how I'm feeling about the project. But if I need like some kind of shape made with it very specifically or something like that, maybe I'll use it. So it tends to work out well anyway. So that's all I'm trying to point out here with this one. If you want to use it, right? Very cool way of adding quick detail. You can also hold Control and use it or maybe you can't hold Control, but you got to set it to negative. You can use it in the negative. You don't always have to push the surface up. You can push what I'm getting. If you want to change the height, you can, but it's hard to realign the heights. So I would recommend, like finish doing your kind of like batch work if you want, and then go back and do that. I haven't actually tried this. Let's see. Projected with it. Let's see if it goes all the way through. Oh, it does. Okay. If I hold Control, no, excuse me, plus sign, should be able to go through here with a persistent base, then work out kind of detail here. Be kind of fun. Should go all the way through the bottom too, right? Onto the other side, hopefully, without messing up the other side. See if it works, and it does. So excellent way of concepting right there. Now you can always use the mask tool like that as well. So I mean, it's not really a revolutionary thing, I think, in my opinion, to use the layer tool, but it certainly is fun, in my opinion. So if we ever want to, Shift S, use the mask tool. I think I'm using dot right now. I think spacing works better. Generally. We're gonna just run around, do this. You can see where taking your time really would it's going to bump up your results quite a bit. Like we could make a very basic form and just be like, this is good enough. But just pushing things in and out of the surface a little bit, changing our tools around so they cut through the mesh. Maybe we do, instead of doing another simple, like if I was going to invert it and then inflate it, maybe instead of doing this number, right? Maybe we try like rotating it instead or something. Like maybe just try to rotate all of this inwards a little bit. Hold Shift while doing that. You kind of use it like a clock and wind it up. But yeah, we could try to rotate that and I'll see. A little bit janky, but maybe we smooth that mask first, then try rotating it. Right? A little bit better. Then we can clear that. So maybe we do something like that. It's up to you. I actually like the inflate better. Yeah, but you can see like every little dip and curve shows up. So that's where you got to really think about getting those shapes the most, I think. But for the most part, yeah, like, so we can actually add like a hinge here at some point, make these kind of work together, fit together. And then eventually we might get away with control period, EY. And we might be able to set up either an empty here, or we can hit control period, turn that off. We're just changing the origin point. So eventually we're going to eventually set these things up more appropriately, maybe, right? And so we can get them ready for like in the right place to test some basic like rigging and animation, or basically moving them around to see if we have clearance for rigging and animation. So our concept design would be functional too, right? Like it wouldn't necessarily just be non-functional. It's a cool looking thing. Yeah. We'll delete that one, get it out of the way. And so overall, yeah, can we push this further? And that's absolutely the next step. Usually something like this, if you get it to this point, you can add more detail in here if you wanted to, but you're probably going to ignore it during this step. So if you want to add more cuts and little patterns and things, you can definitely add it just to see what it looks like. But the next step, of course, is going to be creating a plane, turning on snapping or face project. You can turn backface culling on, and maybe leave the line rotation target off for now. This here, when we're in edit mode, we can do retopology shading. Go into vertex, hit Alt Z, machine tools. So we're in edit mode now. This is going to start working onto the surface. Okay. And if we can't see it, it's two things that might be going on. Either the normal's backwards or our shading, the retopology shader here, we might want to bump it up a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. I wouldn't use shrink wrap, and I only wouldn't do that for one reason, because the problem you get with shrink wrap is it picks up a lot of the errors or the little small discrepancies you have all over the surface of this thing, and that's not really what you want. So you want to create like really nice clean quad topo. Use creases if you want to sculpt on it again with multi-res or something like that, and keep them as quads basically. So you'll have to work it out quite a bit. You're really in control at this point at refining everything. And this is probably going to be your hardest step if you're new to like subdivision, or like new to modeling in general, or you're new to subdivision modeling. You don't know how to do this kind of stuff, because what you're doing is you're prepping that quad mesh to do multi-res sculpt, and it's going to give you some really nice, clean, high poly topo, but it definitely, you're going to work for it basically. In ZBrush, guys take this kind of mesh probably and will Z remesh it if possible. Some guys still manually retopo it, but a lot of guys will Z remesh it and move forward with it. And you want to exaggerate your shape sometimes a little bit, because like you can always adjust depth and stuff later on. Here, this is very narrow, so I don't know if that was a good call to keep it. But yeah, exaggeration can go a long way, basically. But you're going to retopo, you're going to create these kinds of meshes. Quad meshes, anyways. This is going to be your closer to your final results, anyways. Right? You're going to start doing symmetry. You're going to start working all this out. You can do things kind of in batch a little bit. You can control V and smooth vertices, even scale them back out. There's all kinds of fun stuff you can do here. Use like the relax tool, loop tools, or whatever. Use sculpting tools, even do some work here. It's kind of interesting. Use shrink. Well, you can use shrink wrap, but I don't highly recommend it. But if you were to use it, you could use a shrink wrap and then like sculpt grab tool. You can kind of like reposition topology on this base mesh, which is kind of fun. Kind of be cool if they mix those two together into like a real-time tool in Blender, or would allow that to happen. I think it'd be really, really good, but it's not here yet. I think there's an add there's a few retopo add-ons, like Retopo Flow, I think is one that has something like that. So you can just use that add-on if you wanted. You do a lot of retopo, manual retopo, that's the way to go. Nothing wrong with that. This is the cleanup stage, the polish phase, if you would. Gonna go clean it up. And so we'll spend all day here trying to retopo this thing, guys. And it's not really my goal for this video to retopo in a time lapse. We don't need to do it manually for the full video, but it could be useful to watch somebody do it, not in time lapse, maybe, because it is quad modeling. So it's the same as subdivision modeling, right? Regular subdivision modeling. And there's certain edges in workflow, like tricks to the workflow, perhaps, that you might find it interesting or want to pick up. Like, what do we do in this area where it's trying to collapse? And we don't really, but we can just reposition things. Loop cut. Little things like that. Beginners, you guys might have some questions on things like that, but really not usually too crazy. Like a weird quad sometimes is needed. I don't think that flow is working for me. I'd rather just keep this way. Don't snap. Like if I grab all of this and I'm viewing it from over here, don't do that. Okay. Don't move it. Don't snap it that way. It does this. It will destroy it. Okay. You need to point that out. Work in local little areas towards the view. Don't work on back faces or side glancing angles and things like that. This we can F2. This one we're going to dip like that. I'm going to think about it too heavily anyways. This will teach you to subdivision model as well. Like if you're not very good at it and you start trying to retopo things, you'll get better at it, basically. Kind of how it works out anyways. That's a good thing. It's usually what you want to do. You can also control right-click vertices. Or edges or faces, I think even. But just to speed things up a little bit, you do something like this. As long as you're creating parallel edges like this, you'll be able to grab like that first edge. And usually, if it doesn't work, you grab all three, press F, and then do F. All right, so you go all the way down with it. Very easy to do that. And this last one here. Just a different edge you got to grab. You can take all these out. There. Right? Clean it up. Symmetrize it if you want. Goes back together. I think we got a double there. I don't know why symmetrize works. Back up to here we go. Just pull that one forward. This one could probably be brought forward a little bit, but instead of doing that, I'm just going to extrude forward like that. Add a loop cut. All right, so I'm just going to do this one little piece here. We don't have to do the whole thing. Turn that retopo shading off. You're going to do this for every part that you need as a separate part, obviously. Later on, you might solidify something like this. Maybe push it in. If you wanted it to be solid, you could leave it as is, or you can do only rim. That's going to give you a non-manifold mesh. So this might be, and I can hit Control 1 through 5, do a subdivision. Off in edit mode. Right. But so if you had multiple panels going on your object, you don't necessarily need to render the interior. You might do something like that, right? Might do only rim. I can also crease inner and outer sections as well, and that subdivision will respond to that. See, it keeps it nice and sharp. The topology here does matter. It may cause it to look nicer or worse, depending on what you're doing, right? I don't personally like the way this corner is working out, so I'm going to up a little different. So how you run your topology also. Nice clean edges and flows, and ultimately this is why I teach a lot of subdivision videos, and I like to talk about art design fundamentals and all that other fun stuff, because you can absolutely push it with these kinds of designs if you wanted to, doing things like, and the sculpting part is just like step one of the process. Maybe it really is. I'm gonna just crease this one now. I want to make like a loop here, which I didn't actually create, but it'd be nice if we had a loop here. Point out something like that. See, it even goes all the way across. Boundary select loops, boundary loop. We can crease these up. So when it subdivides, we get optional, obviously. And you can see every little bit of retopo that we just did, these things need to be very finely tweaked, right? Because the curves are not going to be correct. This is one of the main reasons I like being able to spin the view. I can look at this model from any direction now and line up to it and say, is this flat enough, right? If that's not flat enough, I might take this edge and just pull it in a little bit. Maybe this one goes. then we get something more. This is really good for surfacing as well when you're working on subdivision mesh. Most people don't realize that. Definitely something you want to consider doing because it just gives you a better way of looking at the. Okay. And you get used to it after a while anyways. It's not. First, I don't like this top edge increased. Second. So rounding out into fading into a curve. I guess we could do that. I don't know. I kind of don't like that either though. So part of this design is already kind of bothering me. That happens. And this is, this is why you don't want to spend too much time like working on the sculpt. You just want to kind of get the big overall idea going and then maybe add a little bit of fun detail to it and then move to like another piece and another piece. You might get to a point where you retopo it and you're just like, this is great, but not really working out the way I thought I wanted it to be. So you might try sculpting another piece. Working on that one for a bit. So concept design, you're going to do variations on. See how I'm alt clicking and I'm trying to alt click. So here's the thing. If you're alt middle clicking, trying to look at different parts of the mesh and it happens way too fast, like it pops into the left and right view, like snaps or gestures under input, I think it is, right? Yeah. So there's a mouse drag threshold. It's only at 3 pixels. And so a lot of times you're trying to do that alt click and you accidentally like, oh yeah, it does that number. It's not the end of the world. You can just orbit back out, but it's really annoying, right? Just turn this one up. Okay. This has some drawbacks though. Anytime you do any kind of drag operation, it's going to now take 5 pixels. Sometimes it's noticeable. But the alt middle click will work a little bit better for whatever reason. So you could do that as well. Right. And so, yeah, you do the rest of this object. You UV map it, assign materials. This could be your high poly. Well, if you wanted to do like cinema version of this, I guess you could UV unwrap it and assign materials and all that. Otherwise, it could just be your high poly. And then you just do a low poly mesh of this. You probably base it off of that original retopo mesh anyways. So you could just turn this into a lower poly state. Your game mesh if you want, right? Get rid of some things that don't matter too much or reduce some of the resolutions here or there and stuff like that. This doesn't need to exist, maybe. We could just there, who knows? Maybe try to take it the other way. This really depends on how you want to work the topo. But yeah, you could start to work that to a lower resolution state. Turn things down. Get rid of some of these. Right. That would become your low poly at some point or another, probably. If I had to take a guess. You end up with a high, and from your retopo, you end up with your high and your low. Okay. So really cool way of working. A lot of fun. Don't be afraid of mesh. Don't be afraid of geometry. Don't be afraid of exploring just standard modeling tools, Booleans, subdivision. Don't be afraid of working with this stuff. Even something like this, even though we got all this crazy looking voxel mesh, there's nothing that stops you from creating another geometry and then turning that into a subdivision mesh and then trying to work this out into some kind of crazy little muscle or something, right? So we can flatten it out, rotate it, do whatever we got to do here, basically. And make it thicker. And maybe that's like a little muscular piece that we want to put into our biomech joint some. Who knows? Like apply the scale, rotate it as needed. You don't have to apply those scales, by the way, but it can. So, as long as they're not if they're non-uniform scale where they don't match, then you apply it for sure. Otherwise, you'll get sculpting issues. Okay, but uniform scale, you don't have to apply it. But I'd recommend trying to keep them wet ones anyways. I think it's more useful. And these ones are easy to adjust and modify, right? So you'll see this happen on any of those like biomech arm designs. Guys are very cheap about it. They're just doing stuff like this. Nothing too crazy about it. It's you can use subdivision mesh to create concepts and designs, and you can do the whole concept design in sub D. You don't even have to do sculpting necessarily. The sculpting part of it is just to explore ideas and have a different way of working with the tool and coming up with more interesting shapes perhaps that you wouldn't normally get with poly modeling. It's like strong suits for different workflows and different tools. So, subdivision is really good for these kinds of shapes right here, obviously. But sculpting can also make very similar-esque type shapes and maybe be deformed in just slightly different ways. But you get the idea. All of this becomes a thing, and eventually you might join it to this. But a lot of times you leave things as separate parts and pieces as well. Don't try to make everything as one part or piece. Necessarily. The initial layout might be one part, like this. Like we'd be like, okay, this design I kind of like. I want to keep working it. But maybe we start working this into like a little rigid frame section, and then we have some panels on top of it and things like that, so we can make it make some wires and metals throughout the structure. That's when things really spiced up, right? So it's an iterative process. You have to go through it, play around with these ideas. Don't be afraid of working geo. Having a little bit of fun, guys. It's supposed to be fun at the end of the day. Well, maybe it's not supposed to be. Maybe it was never made to be. Who knows? But it is. It does end up being a lot of fun when you kind of toss off some of the stress you put on yourself and you start looking at it as just more of a creative process and not like this huge technical process, right? Like, yes, there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of buttons, but it's not, once you get past that, it's not that bad. Like, I don't want to work on this one right over here, so I'm just going to, we can remirror it because we kept them separate, right? I'm using proportional edit now, so we can go into sculpt mode if we wanted to and use like the grab tool or the snake hook or elastic grab. We can set this one up so that we can grab projected. Now we can tweak this. It acts like a little bit like rubber or plastic or something. It's just similar to proportional editing in edit mode, but it's just a little bit different. Maybe. So it's something you might want to try out, right? You can do that. It's pretty good. Of course, you always have your other tools you're going to end up using, like curves, Bezier curves, great pipes and wires and stuff like that. You can batch edit these. So like one object, but you can duplicate multiple curves within that object. So you can do like batch wire editing this way if you wanted to. You usually will set it to individual origins, and then they all kind of rotate freely on their own. So you can see, you can scale those and do all that fun stuff like that. You just got to make sure they're not intersecting with each other. And that is going to be how you do wires, right? The depth here, fill caps probably. And you can see those are all intersecting, so we can kind of unravel them, perhaps. Do something like that. Maybe move these around. And try snapping these as well. Say, base project, rotation to target. Do that. Kind of snap that surface, right? Scale them in, maybe. Oops. Set this to medium. Scale it in. See how that works. Really cool what you can do here between those two settings, individuals, medians, and also possibly 3D cursor, but look, using normals or locals or some of these other things in here, you might get some, like, just free move these for now. You see it snapped again. Turn that off. Now we have to hold control to snap. Okay? Good thing. Don't always want to not do it like that. And then see, that can go there. Maybe it's looking a little bit rough. Put all these down here for now. Hold control. Oh, that didn't do. Go that way. Okay, we'll adjust those ones up there later. But these ones here, maybe you can hit V and hit automatic. Now we just got. That's another method of doing that, perhaps. Oh, let's take this here. And I'm going to show you one more thing at the very end here, I guess. We were supposed to stop this a long time ago, but we're just hard to stop sometimes. You see, rotating those worked pretty well, except this one for some reason. And it started going the other direction. So this is auto doing whatever crazy. Just rotate it. Just hitting R, and I'm kind of lining my view up to rotate it in the right direction. All right, so we get all this going like this, and we could use those as wires, perhaps. That's the main. But if, let's say we didn't want those as wires, what could we do with this? This is curves, right? And curves have geometry to it. So the fun things about these, let's duplicate one and hide one. And then right click, we can convert it to a mesh. So now this is all mesh. If I Alt S this, for example, right? If I go into sculpt mode, do you think is going to happen with this, right? We can do like the inflate tool now. We can inflate this area like this. And maybe we want to subdivide it once or twice in object mode. It might mess the caps up a little bit, but we can subdivide it once or twice maybe. I don't really like the way it inflated entirely. It was maybe a little bit on one than the others, different areas or something. They're kind of creating like the look of muscle, right? That's kind of fun. This is just a cool trick, right? Like you can do things like, and so we were doing subdivision. Now we're doing curves to mesh, and it just keeps going. Like all this, if you can find ways of mixing things together, do it. Could we keep this like this for now? I mean, yes, we could. It's just curves to mesh, but we could take this and subdivide it like we did. Still another subdivision mesh. And if we want to leave it like that, we could, but we can also hit R. Control R. Whoops. That's a bad thing. I might have just crashed Blender. You don't want to remesh certain mesh, right? Like if it's a voxel mesh and you subdivide it, or excuse me, you don't want to subdivide certain mesh. So this was turning into a voxel mesh, made a subdivision modifier. That doesn't apply to subdivision. Turn that off. Bad idea. Okay. Probably should Control Z that, get rid of that. And try this again real quick. Or excuse me. Subdivide it and apply it. Then remesh it. Okay. And see if that works out. You can see it actually developed some holes, which is, I didn't realize it was going to do that, but I wonder if I just increase the resolution, if it becomes better. No. We got holes in here somewhere on the ends. So I'm going to press A and F. Oh, with the machine tools feature, let me do this. When you have something like this, you use machine tools cleanup feature. You see it says open edges or filled edges or something not found, whatever it says. It's a little red mark there, right? Non-manifold edges found. Okay. And it highlights all of them in X-ray. So those are all your open edges. I know that's the end cap, so I just press F. It fills them. I thought I filled these with the original curves and then I converted it to the mesh, but a little bit odd. I guess they separated or something. That /. Yeah, it's like separated them somehow. So when I take this and I press A and F and I fill it, this is pretty good, but we got this like leftover stuff here. I don't know if I like those. So let's grab here, 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 here. Select link. Use this one here. Okay. That's going to select all that. You don't have to select it by scene even. Those should not be selected. So we can hit Control I to invert selection, delete. We'll clean that up a little bit. That's all I'm getting at. Don't need all those there. All right. Finally, we got something. Maybe we can actually get a good remesh out of that now. And tilde key, or excuse me, press R. Let's change that. Remesh. Golden now, right? So we could have did it at a higher resolution to maintain it a little bit more. But if we wanted to switch to voxel remesh, we could. I think the subdivision mesh would have been better, personally. So I would have just probably kept it. You can mix and match different topologies while doing concept design. Eventually, you're probably going to find that when you're working some geo or like a game object, obviously it's going to be like an optimized mesh. It's not going to be like this. That it really doesn't pay off to make all of your concept, like your original blockout meshes, necessarily all perfect same way. It's not really required or needed anyways, because you can just do things like this. And now we know like, oh, we need to create this kind of thing over here. Perhaps it'd be hard to convert a voxel back into a subdivision. It actually kills more time. You see what I'm saying? So like, could you do this? Yes. Is it always useful? No. Is this more useful? I think so. This, even if I try to just run like a regular quad remesh on it, this isn't detailed enough to use quad remesher on it to get like a good result. But you will get quads out of it at least. So it'll be better to create higher detail mesh out of this than this perhaps. It doesn't mean you can't turn that into a high detail mesh that you bake from. Like if you just go higher resolution with it a little bit, make it look nice and neat, clean. You can bake with a voxel mesh technically and use that as your high. You can work this out, so on and so forth. There's a lot of back and forth. And anytime you watch a professional 3D artist when they're working on a project, especially if they've been modeling for a long time, they only care about like what's the easiest way to get the result or the fastest way to do it. Because you don't want to overwork a project. Like it's just, it runs on and it drags. So anytime you got a choice, like, is it easier to subdivision model it, poly model it, and bevel it? Is it easier to do some sculpting? Like what is the purpose? Like what are you creating? Pick and choose, right? Pick one of those techniques. That's why I constantly teach, Booleans are okay. Subdivision is great. Quads are good. multi-res is going to go on top of the quad mesh usually, and then voxels here are even useful. So now we can create these really cool designs, and it's not really such a big deal anymore. Maybe we create a little asymmetry here somehow and just flip that over. Don't need that now, but we don't even need that one. But I think you get the idea. Could you go through, start doing this? No doubt, have full confidence that the more you play with Blender, when you start picking up standard modeling and then moving into like quad modeling and subdivision and booleans, then working with modifiers and do various different subdivision techniques, this all starts to work. And before you know it, you mix this with your 2D artwork as well. If you're doing 2D, what you're going to find is that it just, you're just going to feel artistically free at a certain point. It's just how it's going to work. You're not going to feel like you're struggling anymore. So anytime you want to come up with cool designs or shapes, you know exactly what to do, when and where and how and why. And it's just a tool. It's a paintbrush at a certain point. And then now the only thing that's really a challenge is creating good artwork, right? Once you know the tool well enough, it's all about being a better artist. It's not about getting a newer software or better, I mean, maybe you can find better references, but trying to understand those workflows that you need to go through in order to go from a rough idea to a finished idea, and then completely finish it out with superb AAA quality, creating really good portfolio pieces, rendering them, lighting them, all that other fun stuff. But coming up with an interesting design for sure is part of the fun, I think. This is where I enjoy working the most, I think. Because like I know this piece here, like if I create a bad piece, I can now create a better piece off of this, right? And so this might not look great. It might have some designs that I don't really care for. I can tweak it, modify it, or I can start on a new one next to it and come up with something better. And if it doesn't look that good, I can just delete it outright and then start working on something and hope that that comes out better. Usually what you want to do, the kind of issue I find most artists run into, is they're not willing to explore iteration and variation enough, right? So you can take something like this and just start resculpting it right here and create a variation, okay? Whatever your strongest pieces are that you create, you should be doing like dozens of these pieces. And then whatever those strongest ones are, you keep and you delete the other ones, or you at least hide them, don't look at them. And so you build up and you start using like your strongest pieces as your new starting point. And you iteratively work off of that. So you might create another strong piece off of that, or a variation that's strong off of that. Then you hide the other ones that aren't as good. And you can start to work forward in your designs and make them better and better and better. Now, is that the most efficient way of doing things? Not necessarily the most efficient, but it's going to start to deliver a result that's far beyond what you usually are capable of when you start doing that. So don't be afraid of starting something rough, making it a little bit nicer, and then taking that and starting over again from that one, or using it as your base now, and then working that, and then working forward, right? Eventually you get to a point where you can do the most insane biomech designs that you've ever wanted to do. It's really not a big deal. It's actually kind of easy. It's the process, it's the workflow, rough to clean, right? Whenever you look at a video game development, they take like 2 years to develop, and the entire time, the level design, the block out for the levels anyways, might have started in like month 1 or month 2 maybe. And it runs the whole 2-3 years of production with multiple environment artists and everybody working on it, level design. So it's not finished in like a single day. It takes time. This kind of project here is going to take you time. It depends on how much time you want to put into it. And the more time you put into it, not necessarily going to guarantee that you get better results. But if you're putting time into it while paying attention to like design fundamentals, art fundamentals, thinking about, like, is this structurally capable of supporting a big spider mech or something? Is it some kind of leg or something, right? Is this joint, is this kind of like assembly here look something realistic, right? Like kind of machinery or something. And if it doesn't, and you go and you fix those problems, you should be taking notes the whole way through your project, at least mentally, but it's even better sometimes if you just kind of jot them down on a piece of paper next to you. like what is wrong with this thing right now? What is right? Like the muscles don't look right. There needs to be like an area for it to tuck into maybe. The paneling just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's no like structural kind of like indication of like what's going on internally, even though you don't have to do everything, physically accurate. It could be useful, right? This area is a little thin. I'm not sure why, yes, but maybe we want to create like some kind of cylindrical shape in here that's like a bone. And so that would make more sense. And this is what we should start looking for in our designs. So if we just free sketch or like free model things, they'll look okay, but at a certain point you got to review them real quick and start to say like, is this a thing that will work, right? Base it off something real, some kind of animal, some kind of creatures, some kind of machinery. Base it off something real. And a lot of these little problems don't pop up quite as much. Okay. Always use references, always be creatively mindful during the whole process. Don't beat yourself up and say like, hey, I am a terrible artist. Like say, okay, this came out, but it's, it's just okay. I mean, it could probably be better, right? And once you can start doing that to your own work, you're better off. You're going to be able to actually get in there and you'll not only see like faults in your own artwork, you'll start even looking at other guys' artwork. You'll be like, where are they messing up? And you'll start seeing that you can become very critical, even if you're not like super good at design or something yet. You can start to see where like designs have issues, right? Why they don't work or why they do work and things like that. So, you might have to try mirroring some things and flipping them around and just doing whatever you got to do here, basically. Make it all happen, right? There, but kind of cool looking in a way. Almost not like a muscle anymore. It's more like just some wires that come out at a weird angle. But you can play around with like contrast of shapes. That's kind of what's going on there. Like that's kind of got a little bit of harmony to it, but it's kind of contrasting in this direction. Trying to go out the side anyways. That, right? So it creates a little bit of a contrast perhaps. Same could be true here. These are very similar-esque, right? Contrast of shapes. What I was trying to do with this guy. Like a cylinder. The contrast of shape, basically. We put another one up here for another joint later on. You see, this kind of brings a little bit of uniformity to it because we're looking at repetition now. So some more design tricks, basically. And you can see where it starts going, though. It gets kind of fun. And we're using a mirror with this bisect on it. If your voxel meshes are not too dense, you can still use modifiers, guys. And keep them non-destructive, which isn't always so possible, maybe, but sometimes it is. I gotta turn decal machine off. It's always messing up my selections. But put that back kind of where it was. I think it was working okay-ish. Maybe not great, but yeah, we could wrap that around the joint a little bit, like in this area. That would be kind of cool if we did that. You look at how muscles attach to bone with like tendons and stuff. It gives you a good idea on how to lay this stuff out, right? Like obviously it doesn't just go in here all willy-nilly. It's going to start wrapping around the structure, attaching to it somehow, possibly. Maybe internally. Then we can have some panels that this thing creeps out of, perhaps, or something. Who knows? Because you can think of like paneling as like skin. So like armor, paneling, that kind of stuff. It's all skin, if you would. Shell of a vehicle. This would be like it's more of its muscles, and then we'd have like its bone structure be in the frame. Joints, of course. And some of this could be like actuators and veins and muscles and tendons and nerves and whatever else, because we might have some electrical stuff going on, right? So, but we're at a starting point now where not too bad, right? Just for the heck of it, if I quad remesh this one, I haven't set up any face sets for this or anything like that, but if I quad remesh it right now, right out the gate here, probably won't do a very good job, first of all. I just want to kind of show you that for a concept piece, and this is the reason, like some guys are maybe curious about how I use quad remesh. This is just one of the ways I use it. There's a lot of different ways. But originally I bought quad remesher just to do concept part like this, where I could just take a very dirty voxel sculpt, quad remesh it, end up with something like that. And in our case, it still did a pretty terrible job in this area. It's just like a lot of band. But yeah, that was it. So I could do draw overs on it, and overs and stuff. Well, you could do it on this. I just find that quads tend to create a little bit smoother shapes I kind of like, but for more organic stuff like characters or whatever, that could be quite useful. But it's not required necessarily, because any of this could be smoothed down, right? Go in here and mesh filter smooth it a bit. It will work out. As long as it's dense enough, and these pieces will work out. Right? A little bit soft though. Also another fun way of working. Become quite soft. This is a bad example for the quad remesher though, to be honest, because it's much different when you're doing like sculpting on it, like characters. So I think you'll use that for. Oh, I'll use that for the thumbnail, not you guys. But I think you get the idea. This does work. These muscles are still like these guys. What is going on with these? Hiding you. Okay, and we'll hide. Okay. And so that's like an introduction to it. Bunch of tools you can use and have some fun. Explore this idea, play around with it. It takes a little while to master. And even here, trying to go through this whole video as fast as I did, you can see it didn't end up with a super stellar result, but that's how it is. You don't have to take them to a high resolution. Like you can do them very low resolution, retopo them, and then add in your panel cuts and your subdivision modeling techniques and everything. You do not have to go high. Do very basic forms even, and then just retopo on top of those or model on top of those. Use it as a reference or guide. Have some fun with that too. Okay. So all in all, I would say workflow is probably going to go best if you do 2D thumbnail sketching, moving into 3D like concept sculpting like this, and then retopoing it if you want, or modeling around it. Okay. Turning it into either Boolean in-gun mesh or quad mesh or subdivision, whatever you need to create a high poly. Right? Use whatever you got to use to create a high poly, and then you can go through and create a low poly around it, which is much, I think, is much easier. All in all, it's a lengthy process, but that's kind of the breakup in stages. So a lot of like game productions, they're going to have kind of their concept art team there doing either characters or mechanical things or whatever they're working on. They're doing concept art most of the time in the pre-production phase, right? Or they might even be working on it during the production phase. But the guys that are doing the high quality 3D models for the game and high to low bakes and all that fun stuff, they're not coming up with the designs usually, unless they're in a smaller studio or they're just the way the studio is structured that they actually end up doing it maybe. But that's just how it goes, guys. Great, cool stuff. Have fun. I'll see you in the next one. All right. Take care.